Once upon a time there was an old miller who had 3 sons. When the miller died, he left his sons a mill, a donkey, and a cat. The eldest got the mill, the middle got the donkey, and the youngest had to take the cat. The older brothers laughed at him, but the cat promised that he would make his younger brother rich if he gave him a pair of boots and a bag. The owner was surprised, but fulfilled the cat's request. The cat immediately pulled on his boots on his hind legs, poured oats into the sack, threw it over his shoulders, and went hunting. In the forest, he opened the bag, threw it on the ground, and hid himself in the thickets. He didn't have to wait long. A curious hare galloped to the sack and climbed into it to feast on oats. And the cat was just waiting for that. He jumped out of the thicket, tightened the sack, lifted it on his shoulders, and went to the royal castle. The king of that country was a great lover of good food. The cat bowed deeply to him, handed the hare, and said that it was a gift from his master, the Marquis de Carabas. The king was pleasantly surprised by this surprise. The cat bowed like a real nobleman and hit the road.
Goodbye.
The next day he went hunting with the sack again. This time he managed to catch 2 fat partridges. The king was delighted to see another pleasant gift. For several weeks in a row, the cat continued to wear partridges and hares to the king. But he did not say anything about this to his hungry and emaciated owner. Once the cat saw a princess in the palace. She was very beautiful. The cat realized that she would be a wonderful wife for his master. And so the king wanted to finally meet the Marquis. The cat replied that they could find him tomorrow for a walk where the mills were. And he himself ran at full speed to the mill. Seeing the owner, the cat said that tomorrow he will need to swim in the river, and then his life will change. The next morning, as soon as he got into the water, the cat grabbed his clothes and hid them in the bushes. At that moment the royal carriage appeared on the road. The cat jumped out onto the road and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Save me! Help! The Marquis de Carabas is drowning!" Hearing this, the king ordered to pull the Marquis out of the water. The miller's son got very frightened when 2 guards began to drag him out of the river where he was basking in warm water. The king ordered to bring him his silk attire. The miller's son initially refused, but he liked the gold-embroidered clothes so much that he gladly put on the royal outfit. The king invited him to the carriage, where the beautiful princess was sitting. The miller's son was dumbfounded, but without further ado got into the carriage. A minute later, the carriage rolled on through the fields and meadows that belonged to the giant cannibal who lived in a huge castle. The cat wasted no time, and what was the spirit rushed ahead of the carriage towards the meadow, where the reapers were working in the sweat of their brow. He asked them to say that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas, otherwise the evil cannibal will eat them. Before the astonished reapers could reply, the king's carriage pulled up. And when the king asked whose meadows they were, they answered in a friendly chorus that these fields belonged to the Marquis de Carabas. Meanwhile, the cat went straight to the man-eater's castle. With feline dexterity, he jumped over the stone wall and made his way into the castle. The cannibal was sitting at a large table laden with various dishes. Seeing the puss in boots, he was greatly surprised at such impudence. The cat began to tease the giant and said that he could not turn into a lion. Before the cat had time to utter these words, the cannibal turned into a huge lion with a shaggy mane. The cat's soul went into his boots from fear, but he overcame it and said that the cannibal could never turn into a mouse. The terrible lion disappeared, and a small mouse appeared in its place. And that was all the cat needed. In the blink of an eye he caught up with the mouse, caught it, and ate it. At this very time, the royal carriage drove into the castle courtyard. Opening the carriage doors, the cat bowed politely and said that he was glad to see everyone in the castle of the Marquis de Carabas. It is difficult to say who was more numb from amazement at these words, the king or the miller's son, who already did not understand anything at all. The cat took the guests to the table. At the end of the dinner, the king, having eaten to the fullest, said that the marquis was indeed a very worthy man, therefore he would gladly give his daughter to wife. The princess was happy, young, handsome, and besides, she really liked the rich marquis. Soon they played a wedding. So the miller's son married a princess and became a prince. All of them lived happily ever after, especially the cat, who proudly paced the palace in high boots. Once upon a time there was a prince in a distant land. It's time for him to get married. The king wanted his son to marry a real princess. The queen wished her son not just the daughter of the king and queen, but that she be gentle, intelligent, and graceful. And he himself wanted to follow the dictates of his heart. The prince went in search of the bride. After a few days of travel, he reached the nearest kingdom. The local king liked the polite and handsome prince.
Nice.
And he took him to his daughter.
Okay.
The princess was lovely. But after talking to her, the prince realized that she was very stupid, and there was nothing to even talk about with her.
Bye.
He apologized, said goodbye, and continued on his way. In the next kingdom, the king and queen were fascinated by the young prince, and immediately invited him to meet their daughter. They took him to the dining room, where the princess was dining. The young man greeted, but the girl did not even look at him. She was very passionate about her dinner. The prince thought the princess didn't care about him. Saying goodbye, he left this kingdom too. The prince traveled all over the world to find his beloved. After much trying, he lost all hope of finding a suitable bride. The king and queen were very concerned about this. Still, they were glad their son hadn't married the wrong girl. One night, a violent storm began. It rained like a bucket, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. The prince could not sleep, watching the flashes of lightning and continuing to dream of his princess. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. When the prince opened, a young girl was standing on the threshold. She was shaking violently as she was soaked all over in the rain. The poor girl was alone in the midst of all this raging bad weather, but even in the rain she seemed very sweet. She said that she was lost in the woods and asked to warm up inside the house. The prince took pity on the poor girl and let her into the house. He led her into the living room and sat her in front of the fireplace. The girl said that she is a princess from a distant kingdom. They were attacked and her parents sent her out of the castle with 2 soldiers. But during the storm, they were lost, and the princess was left alone. It was hard for the queen to believe this, but she could not kick the girl out in such weather. When the prince entered the living room, she was already dressed in a dry and clean dress that the queen had given. She looked dazzling now. The prince could not believe his eyes. He fell in love. But at the behest of his father, he could not marry a girl if she is not a real princess. The queen realized that the prince had fallen in love. She reassured him and said that she knew how to find out if their guest was telling the truth or not. The queen went to the guest room, prepared for the young girl, and placed a small dry pea under her mattress. And on top, she ordered to put 6 more mattresses. Soon the girl went to sleep in her room. The next morning, everyone eagerly awaited the awakening of the princess. And when she woke up, the queen asked how she slept that night. The girl replied that she was very grateful for the night, and that she would sleep much worse outside in the rain. Despite this, she slept very badly and did not get enough sleep. And now her back hurts, as if she was sleeping on a stone. This was the answer the queen had been waiting for. She knew that only a princess could feel the pea hidden under the 7 mattresses. Hearing this and learning that the girl was a real princess, the prince told the king that he wanted to marry her. The king and queen happily blessed the marriage of their son and princess. The prince asked the girl to stay in the palace until the war in her kingdom was over. And he himself sent his troops to help save her country. They soon got married and lived happily ever after.